a lot of Western medicine has lost its morale. It's lost its heart when we're just numbers now.
Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Metabolic podcast. Now today I'm joined by my special guest, Tracey Kimberley. Now Tracey is a certified health coach. Go back to my blurb here. Mum of 4, including one with type 1 diabetes. And unfortunately, like many others out there, I'm sure Tracey's story will be no surprise to people out there. She's had to fight very hard for the right to actually get proper healthcare for her kids and herself, to understand about her and her children's medical conditions. And we'll talk about that a bit today. She and her family are now thriving on various low-carb diets, and we'll discuss what Tracey's doing with herself and her family a little bit later on. And Tracey's a certified health coach, works alongside functional health practitioners and trauma psychologists using food and nutrition to help her clients. Welcome, Tracey.
Thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
You are welcome, and thank you very much for coming on the show. Now, I apologize if I butchered any of that introduction, but please, Tracey, if you can maybe give our listeners and viewers your background, your introduction, all about yourself and your story.
Okay. There's probably bits and pieces that I'll juggle as I go through my story, but I guess with diet and food and health and lifestyle, I, as a person and a mother, woke up in 2016 on the 25th of August, which happened to be last Friday, 7 years ago, when my daughter was rushed to hospital in severe DKA, and we almost lost her. She had about 2 hours to live before she either went into severe cardiac arrest or had a seizure, or died. So it was a bit scary, and she woke up about 48 hours later, finding out that she was a type 1 diabetic. It was a pretty confronting reality, as most, or the limited information I knew about type 1 diabetes then was, legs amputated, fingers going, a very limited lifestyle. And I was determined to give my daughter a life. Right from literally day dot in the hospital, the endocrinologist and myself got off on the wrong foot. I don't like being told that you now have to share your daughter with me and you're just going to have to deal with it. I didn't like that her breakfast table was filled with a breaker, Cocoa Pops, toast, margarine. I was questioning all these things, and he said, "Stop asking me questions. I am the doctor. I am the specialist. You will now listen to me." I knew then that I was in this world that I'd never been in the medical system. My children I'm very blessed. They've never really needed the doctor. Even to this day, none of my children have had antibiotics. It's not that I don't believe in them. They just don't need them. And I believe there's other ways to deal with things first before we need to go and jump other hurdles. And so this is a very scary world, because all of a sudden now I'm thrown into a world where my daughter has to have medication. She must have insulin. I knew that. But then I was there faced with lots of different people, dietitians, nutritionists, diabetes educators, endocrinologists. I mean, it probably didn't help when he waltzed up the hallway and he said, "I'm your daughter's endocrinologist." And I went, "What the bloody hell's an endocrinologist?" So that
Right.
didn't really go down very well. As you know, I'm very straightforward when I speak. I don't sort of mince my words, so he wasn't real proud of that one. Anyway, so so Ashley was diagnosed 2016. Things started to unravel for me. My past, I was anorexic at age 13. I then fell into bulimia. I come from quite a hidden traumatic background with quite a lot of abuse from female abuse, mother neglect and abuse and things like that. I was very blessed to go to a lovely school, but behind the doors there was a lot of abuse and stuff. I realized then, when my daughter was diagnosed, that a lot of what I had to go through and what I learnt when I was 13, 14 and beyond was now starting to come into play, that food was actually going to be the way I was going to get my daughter and my family through this. How, I didn't quite know. it wasn't until about 3 weeks when we got home after Ashley's diagnosis that I realized, again, so I'm jumping again, 6 months prior to to my daughter being diagnosed, my father decided that he was going to quit sugar because he watched a couple of videos on his plane flight home from here. And incredibly, he had somewhat started my journey with learning low sugar, low carb bits and pieces that I had added into the family. I'm a bit of a chef, a home chef. I love to cook. I don't sew. I don't do anything mother stuff. I'm just a cook. I love cooking. My husband sews his army. He can sew. I can't even thread a needle. And so I created some recipes for my father when he went through his cupboard and went, oh my goodness, everything has sugar in it. And so we started exploring things for him. And he'd lost 25 kilos by the time sort of August rolled around. And then Ashley was diagnosed. So 3 weeks after she was diagnosed, we did what the hospital protocol said. We fed some meals that are similar and tried some of these things that the hospital had recommended, things like she was eating 100 grams of carbs per meal. For some people, that mightn't be a lot. When you're dealing with insulin, this is a massive gamble. And I remember that night this night particularly very, very clearly. My husband and I had a bit, I won't say fight because that puts a real negative, but we had a bit of a bingle because there's numbers and we're both trying to work out and we're both trying to do the right thing, give her insulin because she was at this certain level and she was having 100 grams of carbs, and then we had to do this ratio kind of thing to work out her insulin. And it was absolutely ridiculous. We then ended up having to call the hospital to try and work out what we were going to do because she was quite high. She was probably, I think off the top of my head, she was about 17 millimole. So we had to not only correct her to come down, we also had to give food, an estimated amount for the food that she was having. And okay, all sort of seemed to go really well. And it was bedtime. It was probably about 9 o'clock. We put her to bed. I tested her and she was about 7. So she'd come down, good 10 millimole. And I said to my husband, okay, that's good. So, did some cleaning up, whatever. We went to bed. It was probably about 11 o'clock. So it was about 2 hours after. And I said to him, I'm going to go test her. And he said, no. We've got the alarm set at 2 o'clock. We'll test her at 2 o'clock because that's what it says. We've tested her and then we'll do 10 o'clock. And I was like, I don't feel good. I really don't feel, mummy's waters. I just don't, I've got to go test her. I went to test her and she was 1.7.
Oh my
She
gosh.
dropped so quickly, so rapidly. And she still had insulin on board. I was still grasping that in my head now, sitting here knowing what I know. Like, the situation was a lot dire than I really understood back then. And I corrected her, got her back to a safe level. That took a little while, then allowed her to go back to sleep. And I literally walked out her door and slid down the wall. And I collapsed in fear, in tears, all those things running through your head. What if I didn't test her? What if I hadn't have gone in there? What was going to happen? Because there's no such thing as CGMs when my daughter was diagnosed. We were flying blind. CGMs didn't come into our picture until 18 months after she was diagnosed. So that next morning, that moment there, I realized that whatever it is, I need to take this into my hands and deal with it. And food is going to be one of our biggest keys to this whole problem and picture. Anyway, the next day, funny enough, as things sort of happen in parallel with my family, my father had sent me a video of Dr. Troy Stapleton, who is a type 1 diabetic. He speaks wonderfully for low carb down under. And it was a talk on his low carbohydrate diet for his type 1 diabetes, and he's a doctor himself. And I watched that and I knew right then and there, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. And I haven't stopped. I've gone everything low carb, understanding. I was an athlete myself. I was a national swimmer. I thought I knew everything about food, diet, and lifestyle, and I've been corrected. I knew nothing. I still know nothing. I'm learning. I'm learning every single day from people that I talk to, people that I work with. I learned through trials and errors with my daughter. I mean, a type 1 diabetic is a walking lie detector. I love them. I talk to them all the time, everyone that's got type 1, and I piece things together with different foods. I've worked out different keto foods that are not keto because they'll send your blood sugars sky high. But that was one part of our journey. So we got Ashley to a really, really good place. That would have been the end of sort of 2016. Then I realized that I knew nothing about type 1 diabetes. Got the food right. The food was the easy part for me. And then we had to actually navigate the healthcare system to try and get somebody to talk to me about what actually insulin did in the body. Now, I knew and understood insulin from my father having metabolic problems, but there's such a bad twist to insulin. Insulin's this negative, horrible thing, and blah, blah, blah. Well, it is when it's abused, and it's destroying things in the body, but it's also this thing that if we don't have, you've got DKA and you've got my daughter laying in a bed almost dead. So it's actually an important hormone, like extremely important, for so many other things, not just weight loss, weight gain. There's all these other things. And I try to teach people about insulin and how we want to save it. So when I'm talking to type 2 diabetics, I don't talk to them about this negative, insulin, blah, blah. I talk about why I want you to heal it. And so, because I've seen the power of insulin, it keeps my daughter alive every single day, but it's also something that will kill her. So this is why food and everything just plays such an important role for everybody. But with a type 1 diabetic, when you're giving them something, it's really important. So we got her really, really well. 2016, 2017, by the end of 2017, this miraculous equipment called a CGM entered our world, which was just incredible. And she's as special with electronics as I am. So we break them a lot. Luckily, my husband is a software engineer, and he says to us, "Do you two know that you're not in Google Troubleshoot?" So we have lots of fun with CGMs, but I tell you what, they're one of the best inventions that have ever come about. And I was able to tweak so much stuff and work out what foods work in her body, what doesn't, what is keto and what's not, what not necessarily keto, what keeps her ketogenic, what works in her body. And it's quite interesting. There's some foods that I noticed that are in your keto food lists and low carb food lists, and they're not really, on paper they look good, but once they go into the body, they're not so much. And long story short, she started off with a HbA1c of 7.3 when she was diagnosed. In the care of the endocrinologist of the first 18 months of her diabetes care, she went up to 9.7 HbA1c. When the endocrinologist threatened me, when he found out I was going to do low carb, and he kept persisting on that he was going to call docs, and I had two male endocrinologists standing in front of me, quite sizable gentlemen. My daughter standing over in the other side of the room with another doctor beside her, and he was threatening that I will not be able to have my child because I was going to kill her by doing low carb. I packed us both up, left that room, and I have never gone back to diabetes care here. I live in Canberra. I have never gone back to diabetes care here in Canberra. I've searched for all the care that we have. We went overseas to America via Skype and spoke with diabetes people over there. I finally found a doctor here in 2018 who assisted me and worked with me with a lot of things to do with her care. By the end of 2018, my daughter had a HbA1c of 5.6.
Wow, incredible.
And that's under my care. So us mummies can be taught. We can learn. We may not have a medical degree, but I'll tell you what, when it's your baby laying in front of you and their health is on the line, you will do what is necessary to make sure that your child has a life. So now we're a HbA1c of 4.9, but there's a few more stories in between there.
I think that might be better than mine.
So in between there, so we did keto. We did keto really well. As I said, we went down to 5.6. But I did keto so well that I made her sick again.
Right.
Even myself actually, rashes. She started gaining a lot of weight, increased inflammation, and lots of different. So she went from having about 38 units of insulin a day to having about 240 units of insulin a day. And again,
Yeah.
like I faced a few years before that, no one would listen to me because you're just a mum. I've been told that one many a times. And I said, yeah, but something's not right. Somebody, please listen to me. And it was finally in 2019, I saw Paul Mason at Low Carb Down Under. And I said, Paul, please listen to me. Something is not right with Ashley. And he turned around and he said, yeah, you can see it. And I was like, thank you. I said, she's on 240 units of insulin. He goes, crikey, not even my type 2 metabolic patients are on
No.
that. So finally somebody was listening to me again, that I wasn't being this paranoid mother, that there was something just wasn't quite right. So the beginning of 2020, he did some tests for me, lots of tests. He's a brilliant man. I absolutely adore him. And funny enough, a year before all of this happened, I actually started experimenting with carnivore for my own health. So my journey is mental health. I don't read very well. I can't. I was told I always had short-term working memory problems. When I started learning about food and insulin and all these different things, I came across Dr. Georgia Ede and mental health stuff, so type 3 diabetes. So my journey has always been trying to get my brain work, and why I can't think, why I can't be smart like everybody else, why I was always challenged as a kid. As I said, I was a national swimmer. My body's very strong. I'm extremely ketogenic, but my brain doesn't work very well, or didn't. It's getting better. And so I experimented with carnivore, and I found things like a rash that I had since I was 14 disappeared within 10 days. My brain was starting to think clearer. And I felt happy. Coming from an eating disorder, I felt in control, but didn't have controlled thoughts anymore. And I'd had these plaguing me for 25 years. A person with an eating disorder will understand what I mean. There's control, but then there's control, but you're relaxed in control. Like it's a hard one to explain unless you've been through that disordered eating. Anyway, so that was good that I had done that experiment and learning, because then when it came to 2020 and Paul said, right, Ashley's very sick. And I said, yeah, she is. She still had a HbA1c, mind you, of 5.1. But again, here we go. She's got a great HbA1c, but she's still really sick. She now had celiac and huge markers, but we weren't eating gluten because we were keto. And her thyroid was, squiffy. It was not good. But we were doing keto. Like, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
So there were a lot more questions and not many answers. And Paul said, we need to go carnivore. And I went, yeah, okay. Why? Like, explain to me why. Paul sat with me for ages. God bless him. I just love him. And he spoke a lot about lectins. So I went looking at lectins. And then somehow the computer gods put on my computer this podcast between Paul Saladino and Sally K. Norton. And I was hooked. I was hook, line and sinker gone for days and days on oxalates. I have done my own research into oxalates, what it means for me, and I've worked out what it means for Ashley. I can see it in her bloods now when we have too many different things like oxalates and stuff like that. I don't let my kids eat raw plants if they're going to eat any at all. I don't like it. We're really careful with fruit, because now I also know fructose is a neurotoxin. It's really, really interesting. Like, oxalates are, me personally, it's what was damaging my brain. It had damaged parts of my body when I was a swimmer. I was always extremely weak on my left-hand side, very strong on my right-hand side. People would just fob it off going, oh, yeah, well, we always have one side stronger than the other. When I went very strict carnivore in 2021, so I was doing meat-based, so like dairy and every kind of meat and things like that as I was healing, I decided to go, oh, well, there's this lady in America, she does meat patties and a few things, and I wanted to make carnivore somewhat convenient because we're busy. I've also got teenage kids now. My kids are exploring the world. They're out doing things with friends. How am I going to get my children to safely eat while they're out? So I thought, I'm going to experiment with McDonald's meat patties. And so I started doing that in 2021. And within 3 weeks of doing that, I ended up with a frozen shoulder, quite severe, like I couldn't move. And it was actually oxalates coming out of my joints in my shoulder and my elbow and moving with the synovial fluid. And I ended up with actual lumps and bumps and crystals coming out of my skin.
Wow, really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was crazy. Absolutely crazy. And then the good old fun thing, which Sally talks about in a lot of her books and coaching classes and stuff, is trying not to let your body dump. Well, good old Tracey, as she likes to teach people, she does things to herself. And I experienced my first very severe dumping episode, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And this made me really wake up to the fact that this was very, very real. The oxalate accumulation that a lot of people do face, and a lot of people don't really understand. I've never, ever had a kidney stone, never had a problem with that. But my body was accumulating crystals. I still am releasing them. I'm 4.5 years now into pretty meat-based carnivore living, and I'm still, like, I had a beauty come out here on the back of my neck. It was quite sore, and it was quite an oxalate crystal coming out of the skin. Very, very interesting. I find it quite fascinating. Ashley, being still that she's young, 18, she hasn't had the accumulation like I have over the years of building that up. So she doesn't sort of go through as much as I do, but I can still tell every now and then when she has an oxalate blip in her CGM, that we're sort of going through a state. And females tend to deplete oxalates in their menstrual cycle.
Yes.
Because it's blood, it comes out.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting learning all that and working with her with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Sally's book. I've got that here. It's an excellent book, and I recommend all my patients to get it. And she talks about that in there. You know, she talks about differences between males and females, dumping between seasons. It's fascinating stuff.
It's really, absolutely
really is,
fascinating. I absolutely adore that book. I highly recommend to a lot of people actually get the book and get it on audio and read and listen at the same time, because part of you will pick it up, part of you can read. And doing that dual can sometimes be really handy because there's so much information, like there's so much, and she goes through it in so much depth. So I have it in both ways. So I can sort of listen. I go for lots of long walks, so I can kind of listen again and go over things with her, because you know she's talking to me on the on the audio. So yeah, it's lovely. But that book I highly recommend to a lot of people.
Well, she's kind of tentatively agreed to come on the podcast in a few weeks, hopefully. So that will be excellent to have a chat to her. So listen out for that episode, everybody. You mentioned Dr. Paul Mason. Now, I know he does listen to this podcast as well, because he's contacted me a few times wanting a chat. So hello, Paul, if you're listening to this. Glowing praise there from Tracey. So was he suggesting oxalates, or was it lectins, or was he kind
Paul's was
it your
lectins?
own?
I mean, it's not that he doesn't not believe in oxalates. For me, oxalates were they were the missing piece to our puzzle.
Yeah.
The lectins was a big thing. Don't get me wrong. The lectins was still a big thing. You know, here's the young girl. She was my firstborn. She would steal veggies and fruits and things out of the fridge. And I thought, I'm a really good mum. Look at me. That's why
all the good stuff, you know, that's going to make her healthy.
Oh, like, look at me. I've never not eaten meat. I've always been meat. Look, when I was in my anorexic days, meat probably actually saved my life, because back in my day, our day, when we were younger, meat didn't actually really have nutrition panels on it. So for my disordered eating brain, I couldn't, there was no numbers somewhat factored into that.
Yeah,
If I
interesting.
saw mince that said fat free, then I would go for that because I
Mm,
was fat phobic. Um, but I never really associated meat fat, like on a T-bone and steak and mince, so much. Say we bought it from the butcher, I didn't
yeah.
associate. Again, I was 13 when I was anorexic, so I was still a very immature brain going through this. It was a very hard stage in life. Um,
Mm,
so I didn't associate. So I was probably actually very, very lucky that I didn't, because I actually still ate a lot of red meat, which has
mm,
probably kept me alive.
yeah. Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So thank goodness I knew something back then. But now we do. So when Paul came on board, we went very, very strict carnivore, and almost overnight, Ashley's insulin started to come down. There were still some hiccups. There's still some things happening, and that's why I went even further to look. And that was where I started realizing the oxalates. And as they come out of her body, they were causing spikes in her insulin
Yeah, that's really interesting.
because it's stressful. Sally talks about it
Yeah.
in her book, how stressful
Yeah.
and how challenging and hard it is for the body. Now,
Mm,
I am part of Ashley's body. I'm her pancreas. We are her pancreas. She's now 18, so she sort of is taking some control. But back then, I was her pancreas. And so we know with stress and cortisol,
yeah.
insulin is needed. It goes up. And so I went looking as to why was she having these funny spikes. And then I'd sort of look at other signs and symptoms around. She'd get some spots on her face. She may need to go to the toilet a little bit more. Her
Mm,
urine was a bit more cloudy. And so I was like, well, I wonder what, and look, and then as
yeah.
I said, Sally Kay and Paul Saladino, that
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. In retrospect, it's simple. Yeah. I mean, if I heard that, I'd say, well, these are oxalates.
Correct.
In retrospect, now that I know that, I mean,
Mm,
a year ago, even a few months ago, honestly, I didn't know that much about oxalates, even a
mm,
few months ago. And it was
yeah.
really only through reading Sally's book I've learned so much. It really is a great book. Anyone that's out there, I'll put a link in the description.
Mm,
Really, really great book. Everybody should be reading that.
yeah.
I mean, well, I mean, like a lot to kind of unpack there.
Sorry, I know this.
No, like it's absolutely fantastic. Great story. I mean, a lot to unpack there. Obviously, a few things I want to go back on. Obviously, you mentioned
Yeah, sure.
yourself with a history of eating disorder, anorexia.
Mm,
Your daughter, of course, Ashley, with type 1 diabetes, CGM's coming on the scene.
mm,
As well, and of course, all about oxalates. So, a few things to unpack there. I'm sure as a lot else. Where do
yeah.
you stand on the idea of CGMs for everybody? Do you think everybody should get a CGM, or do you think this
I
should
would.
be reserved for people? Because this, I do see people arguing about this, and it
Oh,
seems to be a bit of a contentious thing. It's kind of
yeah.
like the Ozempic for diabetics almost, but like,
Mm.
should people be reserved CGMs for those with type 1 diabetes or serious type 2 diabetes hard to control, or do you think there's a role for everyone having a CGM?
I think personally there is a role for everybody. I think it's extremely important. Um, it's yeah. Look, again, yes, I understand that everybody on type 1 diabetes now is actually subsidized by the government, and that is an absolute blessing. And I am so grateful. That's going to save a lot of lives, especially our babies. A lot of them can't communicate and tell us that their blood sugars are dropping. They can't explain or tell you that they're high. Uh, and so, it gives flexibility and freedom for parents to allow their children to go to a birthday party, to go to a sleepover, to go and have fun with their friends, and you can monitor from afar.
Hmm.
Um, so, yes, there needs to be a reserve for our most vulnerable, which is our type 1s. Then, yes, second of all, our very severe type 2 diabetes people, um, they need it. If you are using insulin, you really do need to be able to watch your blood sugar levels and what you're doing, because insulin can save your life, but insulin can also kill you. So, yeah, I really do. Again, though, there's still people and I sit in that court. Why do we still have type 2 diabetes? We can
Yeah.
reverse this.
Oh, we absolutely can.
So,
For 99% of people, we can.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but maybe there are some that we really do need to put them on a CGM, because we've got to see what foods are actually impacting them. Like I've experimented with Ashley,
Yep.
in many of your keto food lists, raspberries are in there. For Ashley, you give her a raspberry and she'll go from 5 to 15 within seconds.
Yeah, wow. Good.
I had a type 2 diabetic client, beautiful man, and he would call me up and he'd go, Trace, my bloods, I can't get them down today. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Tell me what you've been eating. Let's have a look. And he had a CGM, which was a blessing. And he's like, I'm sitting. He goes, I keep skyrocketing after breakfast to 15. I said, all right, let's unpack breakfast. What is it? Tell me. And then we'd go through it, and it was, he'd had some bacon and eggs, and then an hour later he'd sit down and he'd have his Greek yogurt, and he would have blueberries, strawberries, and raspberries. The moment I got him to take those raspberries out, his blood stayed at 5.
Yeah, wow.
So even he was challenged. And now you go and read anything about oxalates, you look at Judy Cho, who's the nutritionist, you look at Sally K. Norton, oxalates are huge in raspberries.
Yeah.
Raspberries are also a food that was man-made. We have created them to look beautiful, look pretty, and be sweet and tasty like they are. And they're massive in oxalates.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're not as healthy as everybody would like to think they are. So it's been very interesting having a type 1 and looking at some of these keto foods. I've been able to manipulate people's diets based on what my daughter, okay, yeah, it's an N=1, but then when I tweak some other people's diets, I get N=2, N=3.
Exactly. You
and
start to see the pattern.
I start to see patterns. Yeah. So blackberries, raspberries, they're not as friendly as some people would like to believe they are. And especially if we're honing in and targeting on a specific something like inflammation, gut inflammation, we have to take this seriously.
Yes. No, absolutely.
Oxalates
I
are
agree.
a serious thing. Massive.
Yeah. I actually saw a patient today. She's 56, I think, off the top of my head, mid-50s. And she's got like stage 3B, maybe kidney failure. And she's like 50 something. It's like, why have you got kidney failure? Or I don't know. My GP just keeps bringing me back for, bloods or whatever. And I'm like, okay, but why have you got kidney failure? Like, there's no reason. Okay, like, tell me about your diet. Oh yeah, like I eat this, I eat that. Okay, like fine. Like, do you eat spinach? Oh no, I hate spinach. Can't eat spinach. Oh, but I every couple of weeks I make me and my husband a sorrel soup. And I didn't have the book with me, and I was just like, oh my god, sorrel soup. Like, you know what I'm talking about, because you've read the book, and if Sally's listening, she'll know what I'm talking about. In the book, she uses this example of sorrel soup actually killing someone.
Yeah.
And it just turns out this lady is actually they're not having it all in one sitting. They have it over 2 weeks for some weird reason. Okay. And probably the only reason she's still alive is because she's spacing out this sorrel soup. And then she's also chucking a ton of parsley into it, which is massive in oxalates as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, my God, this woman's just poisoning herself.
Yeah.
With these oxalates. So anyway, she's going to stop them now. She's going to go slow, reduce them slowly.
Yeah.
And then we're going to monitor her. But yeah, it's just, these oxalates are so crazy.
It's interesting, but there's just been released that there's going to be a 5-year study in oxalates. I just was sent, a friend tagged me in it just before. Susan Owens. I don't know if have you heard of Susan Owens?
I've not heard the name, no.
Susan Owens writes Trilo Oxalate, TLO. It's a Facebook group that I'm a part of. Sally K. Norton talks about Susan Owens a lot. Her son, or she does oxalate research into autism, because autistic people tend to produce endogenous oxalates more than others. And she's put I'm pretty sure it's her son, Susan Owens, who has a son that's got autism, and she's been on this oxalate, and she's been funding oxalate research over the last several years to actually get true understanding and readings of oxalates in food. There's also the Vulva Foundation in West Virginia in America. I think Sally talks about.
Sally just talk about that, yes.
Yeah, they actually have very true readings of oxalate. But this new study that's going to come out 5 years, I'm super excited. I never thought I'd
Yeah.
get so excited over a small little crystal.
No, but that's great. I mean, it's crazy because Sally talks about this, and I know this is true, like 150, 200, 300 years, probably longer, we've known about oxalates and the potential damage they can cause, yet nobody knows about them.
Well, we do.
It's,
We just don't want to know about them
well,
because we might
well,
make people well.
but I mean, I remember that in medical school, learning about pseudo gout, and it was this weird, like, what the hell's pseudo gout? Oh, don't worry, it's just not gout. Okay, but what actually is it? Oh, well, it's just a different form of crystal. Okay, but like, what is it?
Yeah,
What call? Oh, we don't know. It's just we just call it pseudo gout,
yeah,
and yeah, it's actually just it's oxalates.
yeah.
That's what pseudo gout basically is. But even if we go back to like 150 odd years back to James Salisbury and the Salisbury steak, there were doctors curing people of incurable, autoimmune conditions, rheumatoid, ulcerative colitis, all these kinds of conditions where you either had terrible disability or just died if you had them
Mm,
with a carnivore, essentially carnivore diet,
yeah.
saying that, well, we think it's the plant toxins, take them out, oh, people get better. Like, how did this not just like, how did the medical profession just kind of say, you know what, like you're curing incurable stuff, but you're just a weirdo.
Yeah.
How does that happen? It's just insane to me.
I don't know. I mean, as a mother who I look, I'm not a professional at anything. I laugh with people. I say I'm a jack of all trades, master at nothing, because I learn where my children need to take me. I learn where my patients that I sit with need to take me, and I go and just read. I mean, I'm right now doing light health. I'm working with Jalal Khan, who's um, a a biologist who's a quantum biologist, sorry, and I'm doing some coaching and learning with him because I want to go further with people's health. I can see things that are just like food is a massive part, don't get me wrong, but there's so many other aspects and facets to what makes a healthy human being.
Hmm.
And I just want to keep learning. I
Yeah.
hope that I never stop. And so I all my children, and I can, this is another N equals one. If Ashley doesn't wear her glasses, her insulin requirements overnight actually go up
Hmm.
because she doesn't sleep properly
Yeah, more
because
cortisol and more glucose.
she's in front of the computer.
Yeah.
Um, I started getting into this back in 2018
Hmm.
because she was about to get a laptop for school, and she's grade 9, and our
Yeah.
children are in front of all these devices. So there's a lot of facets and aspects that come into play working with a type 1 diabetic because everything affects you.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. But food, I have to say, is one of our, keeps us alive, but it's also one of our biggest enemies.
Oh, it certainly can
It's,
be. And you mentioned insulin earlier being, kind of blessing and curse. I think that's a great way of kind of talking about it. Life saving, life giving, and also potentially life taking, to be feared and respected. And of course, insulin is involved in so much in the body, not just blood glucose. That's how everyone knows it. But I usually say to people, it's like the ocean. 99% unexplored. Every time it seems there's a new function within the body, discovered, it seems insulin's somehow involved.
yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating. Just to touch quickly back onto CGMs, we were talking
Mm,
about that.
mm.
I mean, I think it kind of sounds like you're saying, look, people should, if they can, access them for education or, learn what food does to them, to their blood sugars.
Just trial and see and work out what's happening. I mean, it could be the food you're eating, it could be something that's happening time of day. It's I think CGMs are a magical thing. They're
Mm.
great. um, they're they're a technology that I think are underutilized. They're not, a lot of people don't really know how to use them. I I specialize in reading them because I do it every day of my life with my child. So I actually encourage all my clients to get a CGM. I believe at the moment Freestyle Libre have your very first one for $15. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Around about, yeah. So
Yeah, they've
I
got a
know
trial one.
Dexcom. Yeah, I've got like a Dexcom here that I use that's like $30 for 3 weeks or something. And
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's a fantastic tool. I'll help anybody. If anybody gets one on and they don't have anyone to help them read it, just send me a message. I'll help you read it. I found a lady had sleep apnea by looking at her CGM, and I sent her to the dentist to go and get sleep studies, because I also found that my daughter had sleep apnea. Again, she was probably about 13, so it was 2 years after she was diagnosed. Obviously, we had the CGM, and she's having these funny spikes at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she was requiring more insulin. Now, Chinese body clock and lots of things, 3 a.m., that's where we as adults and children start to come into that adult brainwave stuff. They go into REM sleep at about 3 o'clock. We go into a deeper part of our sleep at 3 o'clock, roughly. She was spiking. So her body was showing me a stress response, because it was a quite quick cortisol response. And I started, as I do, learning, looking around, piecing things together, investigating what could it be. And I took her to Symmetry Dental here in Canberra. They're the best family, boys and father dentists you could ever come across. And I was still that weird mum. And they looked at me and they went, "Oh, she's back again." Yeah, all right. Well, because I'd already had my son, and because he wasn't breathing properly, and they were sort of listening to these food things I was talking about. They were into food, but not my food. Just a little bit of food, and they were starting to swap the pyramid around. I'd already flipped it, and I asked them, "Please, could you just do some tests? Could you do what you did with Caleb, but look at Ashley?" And they were like, "Oh, look, she's a little bit older." And I said, "Yes, but she's type 1 diabetic. She will be slightly delayed because we've got to catch her body up. We've got to make sure her body's safe. Could you please just run some tests?" Anyway, they did some scans and things like that and came back in with jaws on the floor and went, "She's a 40% blocked airway already. She has sleep apnea. She's silent sleep apnea. It's very rare to catch it in a kid like this." Because usually you don't see it in a child, and you'll see it in an adult who ends up with chronic migraines, neck problems, headaches, etc. Diabetes spoke to me and showed me that she had perfect teeth. She had perfect, absolutely perfect straight teeth. We had to get they got a special type of plate made for her to actually bring and unlock her TMJ joint and things like that. And that was, I'm very grateful when people listen to me. I mean, I know I come across a bit strange sometimes, but the universe shows me things that I'm meant to learn, I'm meant to know. And again, that helped me save another lady's life several years down the track when I saw the same response in her blood. She wasn't on insulin. She was a pre-type 2 diabetic. And she's now actually reversing. She's didn't quite make to type 2, thank goodness. She's going back this way. And her sleep has improved immensely by actually getting a splint. I don't believe in CPAP machines, working with the Symmetry Dental boys. It doesn't actually help you and teach you to learn to breathe. It just pushes air into you. So by actually going to see a functional medicine dentist, you can get certain splints to help bring your jaw forward, and get your tongue back into your mouth so you can actually learn to start breathing yourself. Again, some people won't believe that, and that's fine. That's your journey. That's where you need to go. I like working with people who want to get the body back to doing what the body knows it can do.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's all about what is the actual problem there. If you need a MAS, the best support is a MAS. A mandibular advancement splint. Anyone that doesn't know what MAS is, MAS, and it brings the jaw forward. As you're saying there, Tracey, same as when we do like a jaw thrust for CPR. Basically, it brings the jaw forward, pulls the tongue forward with it, allows the airway to open up. And if that's the problem, then a MAS really is what you need ultimately. For some people, they will just the MAS wouldn't help them, and CPAP would probably be the best thing. I mean, you mentioned there, of course, a few things about just being just a mom, and of course not knowing anything. Of course, you're very well educated now. Let's go back. That's a good segue to go back a little bit, if we can, and recap about this history of the type 1 diabetes and the threatening to call docs. And I mean, like, how that must have made you feel absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it did. It wasn't the nicest feeling, but I've always been somebody that, well, I tend to annoy people because I ask a lot of questions and I want to learn when people are in front of me. So um, I wasn't as insulted as I probably should be because I'm kind of used to annoying people. So I went home and did my own research, and actually in Australia there is no law that I have to see a pediatric endocrinologist. It was made up and told to me here. The Canberra politics here in the diabetes world is interesting. I won't go into it too much, but there's only two pediatric endocrinologists at the time here in Canberra, and they sort of ruled everything. So you are by rights allowed to build your own diabetes care team. When I met my GP that I have, she's the most beautiful doctor. She documents every single thing that I do. Every doctor, dentist, metabolic specialist, diabetes person in the United States, every single thing that I do, she documents just in case that one day that doc's threat was actually going to be true. She's got that I do take care and do everything I can for my child. That threat's sort of a bit washed now. She was 18 a couple of months ago. So,
yes, probably not an issue anymore. But
it's not,
I mean, just the fact it got to that, you know,
correct.
you were kind of threatened with that, all because you wanted to explore a low carbohydrate diet.
Correct. Yes. Because I wanted to explore a low carbohydrate diet, and I wanted to understand what insulin was and what it was used for. That caused a lot of threats. And I realized that my daughter was never going to be treated as Ashley, who has type 1. She was number 417 who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Like, she's just another number walking through that door. And that made me feel really sad. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm very, very grateful for the doctors and nurses that brought her back to life when we ran into emergency medicine and I needed their help. But a lot of Western medicine has lost its morale. It's lost its heart when we're just numbers now. We're individuals that walk in. Why was I not spoken to by the endocrinologist? You've known your daughter for 11 years. I've just met her. I've studied for 11 years. How about we come together and we work out what your daughter needs? Okay, that sounds a little bit washy, but
No,
I
that's
think
the way it should be.
there still should be respect, patient and client. You yourself have done how many years of study? There's probably a lot of things that you know that are even greater than I do. But at the same time, I know myself very, very well. So why don't we come together and we work as one to work through the issue I've come and seen you for?
But that's not the reception that you got.
It's not, and it seems to be in a lot of different specialist departments in the hospital, especially. That doesn't ever seem to happen. You're just another number, another person. They don't sort of get to know you. I know and I understand that there's time constraints, and I get that, but it's very sad. I mean, we were put on 3 different insulins when Ashley was diagnosed, and the pharmacist who I got to know, she was like, "Why are you on 3?" And I went, "Well, I don't know. No one will tell me about it." She goes, "Most people are on 2. Why are you on 3?" And she kept asking me every time I'd come in with a script, and I don't know. So I finally went to an endocrinology appointment, and he looks at me and he goes, "What are you doing wrong?" And I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean on what am I doing wrong? I'm following everything that you've told me." He goes, "Here, look at this graph here. She's having a low here and she's having a low here. You're giving her too much insulin." And I said, "Well, I'm using the cards. They have this stupid card system." I said, "I'm using the cards. I'm working out what I'm giving her. I'm doing exactly what you have told me to do. I'm giving the insulin." Anyway, that conversation just kept going round and round in circles. Finally, he said to me something. He goes, "Well, you know that the biggest meal of the day is at dinner." I said, "Not in our house." I said, "And not her. She doesn't really eat a huge dinner. She eats a really big lunch, or she comes home and has afternoon tea kind of thing. That's all the way she's been. She just doesn't eat a big dinner before bed." And he goes, "Well, there's your problem." My problem. Shut up,
Mm.
Trace. Just be quiet, Trace. Just Trace. Stop. um, okay. So he goes, well, then she shouldn't be having this insulin because insulin is a 5-hour
Yeah.
insulin. And I went, what do you mean a 5-hour insulin? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, don't worry about it. So that's where I went home and I actually learnt that exogenous insulin has these timelines that work in
Yes.
your body. This is why people can inject insulin and you have to know 4, 5, 6 hours later if they've got insulin inside them, because they could
Mm.
have a hypo doing different things. So it's very interesting. You've got to learn these things when you're
Mm.
injecting insulin. And yes, the insulin he was giving, because of the small food or the types of foods that we ate for dinner, didn't have the longevity of that particular insulin that she was having.
Yeah.
So she was having these hypos a few hours later
Yes.
after dinner.
But
But
that was never
it
explained to you.
was never asked how we ate. It was
Yeah.
never asked or explained to me, these insulins. Um, However, long story short, when we sort of swapped over to carnivore eating and eating a lot more meat, those 3 insulins actually do work very well when you know how to use them.
Yes. So what's I mean, Ashley's not on the show herself now, but is she doing carnivore now, or is she kind of keto? Where is she at now? Low oxalate
Where is
keto
she
or
at? I allow, like all my children, to learn and experiment for themselves. She is whatever she needs to be. If she goes out with friends, whereas most 18-year-olds going to hang out, McDonald's, so she will eat meat patties. Funny enough, most of her friends now actually like to eat the way she eats. So she'll get a little bit of onions, meat patties, and some cheese, and they all eat
yeah.
predominantly the same. So she's a support worker like myself. She helps some trauma people that I need her to help me with.
Mm.
So she gets McDonald's meat patties and uses those to eat with my clients, trauma clients, and help them. She will eat. So, we've worked like Turkish restaurants. She can go and get lamb kebabs or like lamb shish things, a little bit of sour cream, some cheese. And she sort of ebbs and flows. I allow her to uh, be her own person. I mean, I think I've taught her very, very well. Uh, she'll occasionally go and get like a Turkish box, which will have a little bit of salad in it, and and some meat and sour cream and cheese. At the end of the day, I've said to my kids, the biggest the biggest thing that I will get really cranky at is if you eat seed oils. I just want you to stay away from those. Canola,
Mm.
vegetable, all of those ones. Again, another N=1 story. Ashley will require almost 3 times more insulin having seed oil something than having it
Mm.
that's not made with seed oil.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, so and then the inflammation. Well, her body's very ketogenic. You put
Mm.
that seed oil fat. I hate that it has the same macronutrient because it's not fat.
Yes.
Uh, you put that fat into her body. Her body cannot read it like normal fat and convert it into ketones, and so her
Mm.
body stresses. Everybody's body stresses, and then she quickly flips over. The liver has to start giving her energy. She's an 18-year-old
Yeah.
kid with a brain going, metabolic things
Mm.
happening, cellular stuff. Quick, we need energy.
Yeah.
The liver then squirts out the glucose that it needs because it no longer can get to that fat that she's just consumed.
Yeah.
And she will be out of not out of ketosis. I don't really like that, but that pendulum then swings into a
Yeah.
glucose driven state.
Yeah.
Um, and it'll take actually a day or so to get her back into actually being
Mm.
that nice ebb and flow in that metabolic state.
Yeah, interesting. I know people like Peter Bruckner. I don't know if you heard, you know that name, Peter Bruckner. He talks about, inflammation. Seed oils actually potentially being one of the big contributors to metabolic syndrome and
Mhm.
and diabetes. Not necessarily actually sugar and carbohydrates. I mean, I apologize, Peter, if you're listening and I'm butchering your work. I apologize. but he does a lot of education, I think, around seed oils and the inflammation
Mm,
there as well. And you mentioned, of course, Paul Saladino, and he
mm,
certainly
does a
rallies
lot.
against the seed oils.
He's very
I've been
quiet about it.
He's exceptionally quiet about seed oils.
Yeah,
I've been listening to a few of his podcasts lately, and I think he's got a lot of very, very good stuff to say. And
correct.
maybe at some point I'll see if I can get him on the show. Who knows? I'll get onto his show and have a chat with him. But
Beautiful.
very, he's very knowledgeable. So people are like, "Oh, you should like try and get on his show," and I'm like, "Oh, he's going to show me up." He's exceptionally
No,
knowledgeable, but
he is.
he really knows his stuff, and he certainly rallies against seed oils. We know that these industrial seed oils are just so terrible for the body.
Hmm.
They really really are.
Yep,
So I mean, so obviously Ashley's doing kind of her own thing now as an 18-year-old, but
yep,
you've got four kids in total. One, of course, Ashley
correct.
with type 1 diabetes.
Hmm.
One thing that I think a lot of my listeners, viewers, comments I get on YouTube about is how do you practically manage kind of low carb, keto, carnivore as a family?
Uh, yeah. I'm not going to say it's hard because I don't think it's that hard, but I like to let my kids learn and experiment. So they still go on sleepovers. I don't pull rank. I mean, a lot of families know that we eat differently. And I will get mums come to the door and they'll go, this weekend wasn't great. And I'm like, okay. Because I need my kids to learn. Like, when we're working with patients, we want to get them to feel better because they don't know what it's like to feel well. So we want to get them there so they can feel it. But we also sometimes need them to make mistakes because we need them to learn. We're human beings. Some of
Mm,
us really have to learn things by falling in the gutter. Some of
yes.
us can learn by falling near the gutter. Some have to learn in the gutter. So, and I have children that need to learn too. So they learn these things as we go along. So they will have things that their friends are having. They will trial these things. But I'm very fortunate that my children also know what it feels like to be very, very well. So we have a lot of meat. Breakfast is extremely important. I don't like, I mean, the saying breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I agree with that, but don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Breaking your fast is the most important
Break
meal of the day.
fast. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's very, very important, especially when my babies are going out into that world where they're going to be faced with all these other food choices, all these other things that these children have in their lunch boxes or tuck shop or whatever the case may be. I wholeheartedly believe, by coming from that disordered eating background where I don't believe anorexia is a psychosis illness, it's actually a lack of nutrients and energy in the brain, by making sure that my children have all the nutrients, all the fats that their brain is going to need for that day, beginning it in that day, they are not going to go looking for anything else.
Mm.
That's my hope anyway. And for the most part, it actually works. Both my boys now, who are 16 and 15, they tend to not eat much at school anymore. Why? Because their mum, I'm not hungry. And
Yeah.
my brain seems to work better. And probably it does because they're probably quite easily going into ketosis. They're not overthinking food. I mean, um, we know what these foods do to blood sugar levels. They do it in the brain. These children at school, especially, they're literally starving for nutrients. They're starving for actual real energy. That's why they constantly eat all day.
Yeah.
Um, but I also encourage my children to come home and talk to me about what their friends are eating, what they're seeing, what they're feeling, and they do. Hey, mum, do you know my friend had a box of shapes today? I said, oh, anything else? Nope, that's all she had in her lunchbox. And I went, that's what do you think about that? It's not really good, is it? And I said, no. I wonder what the ingredients are in that. And we'll go and have a look. I talk to them about everything because I don't want them to fear this. I want them to understand it, and I want them to understand why I'm concerned about it. And we talk and we look at all these things. It's no different that, to me, as far as I'm concerned, it's no different than watching the news
Mm.
and watching the wars happening and watching planes crashing and all these kind of things. Why can't we read labels on food? Why can't I teach my children the different dangers of things that are also out there?
Yeah.
And they're legal.
They are.
and they're dangerous.
They are, absolutely. I mean, I always say to people, just because they sell it in a supermarket doesn't mean it's safe or good for you.
Correct.
They sell alcohol, not really here in Australia, but supermarkets elsewhere in the world, they sell alcohol, they sell drugs, all these other things. I won't really get into guns and whatever because some people like
Whole
them,
other
some people
topic.
don't. It's a whole other topic for a whole other show.
Yeah.
But just because they sell it doesn't mean it's good for you necessarily.
Mm,
And I think that is a very real thing. It sounds like you have a pretty similar attitude to what we have. In our household, we also have 4 kids, young, so
mm.
7 down to 2.5 months now,
Yeah, cute.
and yeah, we kind of try and let them experience. I think you got to have some guidance, especially when they
Mm,
are very young,
of
because at the
course.
end of the day, like, you are their caregiver, you are the one making the
Mm,
decisions. They are not really having the capacity mentally to make those decisions, so you have to make those decisions for them. But it
mm,
doesn't mean that you can't involve them in
mm,
those decisions.
mm,
But by educating them, like when we go to birthday parties, we don't stop them eating the birthday cake,
mm,
but we also say, yeah, if you have the birthday cake, you're going to go crazy and then have a sugar crash and feel terrible.
mm,
Do you want that?
mm.
And usually they say yes
Yeah.
because they're little kids, but they
Yeah.
get it. They know they're going to get a sore tummy. They know that,
Correct. Hmm.
and they know what happens. When that
Correct.
when that happens, and it's
Mm,
really interesting since we started feeding them more meat, but also giving them a bit more freedom in what they eat. They go to parties and stuff now. They go like, "But Dad, like, there's no proper food here."
yeah, they
They're,
will.
they're,
They,
they're not
yep.
perfect, but they can,
No.
like, they actually will
No.
pick actually healthier choices now.
Mm, mm,
And they won't eat like the fairy bread full of sprinkles and
no.
stuff like that anymore because it just doesn't taste right to them now.
Well, it doesn't have flavor. It's just sugar. Like my son
Yeah.
says, like actually my 16-year-old now, he's really amazing. So I actually put him very semi-carnivore or meat-based when he was 10. So it was a year after Ashley was diagnosed, because he was also diagnosed, sort of, told that he had short term working memory problems too, and he will never amount to anything. He can't learn, which was exactly what happened to me when I was younger. And I was not going to have another child suffer like I did. And he's been on very high meat, fat, sort of keto since 10. He's now actually predominantly carnivore. He's probably a bit low carb, so he's doing a lot of karate and cycling and things like that. He actually eats white rice and meat. That's it. So when he's doing bodybuilding and stuff, just to help his glycogen and a few things like that. Um, but I'm teaching him uh, how to use different meats, different proteins that can actually turn into gluconeogenesis faster and get into his muscles. So uh, I'm experimenting with him doing those things. When he's feeling maybe a little bit flat or a bit sluggish, then we'll add in resistant starch white rice,
Mm.
low oxalate. Because he's like me, he hates fruit. Well, he hates literally every plant, which is great.
Hmm. Yeah.
So complete opposite to my daughter.
Easy to do
So
carnivore then. Yeah.
it's really easy, and he will eat all meat, and so this is where I'm manipulating and twisting and working with the different bodies, working with what he wants to do and the results he wants in his body. White rice is
Mm.
not going to be for everyone. Not everybody wants to bulk and build muscle. He does. He wants to, I mean, he doesn't want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he's 16. He wants to start going to the gym. He wants to feed his muscles. He wants to do
Sure.
things. Now, rice has been in many, many cultures for thousands of years. They didn't have diabetic problems. They didn't have metabolic problems. So
Mm.
is white rice actually a problem? Well, let's work it out.
Yeah.
For some,
Yeah.
it's going to be. For him
Mm.
at the moment, not so much,
Yeah.
which is perfectly fine. So this is where I sort of uh, work these, I sort of twist it. I don't let him have just white rice. The white rice must be coupled with meat. So I'll make him a brekkie fried rice, which is full of butter, ham, eggs, and probably a little bit of cheese.
Mm.
And it's very meat dense with a little bit of rice.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's
Just
the
just the,
opposite.
the opposite of what, yeah. people are
Correct.
normally eating, which
So,
is like
you know how we were
rice
told,
and
yeah,
meat.
have the fistful of meat and then you have everything
Yeah,
else around it. Well, he has
yeah,
the fistful of rice and he has everything around it.
yeah,
So he still is actually, when you work it out, he's still actually low carb. He probably has about, on his big days, he might have about 70 grams of carbs. That's it.
yeah. But if he's lifting and going to the gym, he's probably even in ketosis most of the time anyway.
Correct. Um,
Yeah.
so it's very interesting. I like to sort of play around with diet and look at what. For Ashley, no, white rice would just be really difficult. But funny enough, actually, resistant starch white rice and resistant starch potatoes
Mm,
aren't so problematic.
yeah.
That's a Christmas food. I allow at Christmas time we have fun.
Mm,
Birthdays, Christmas, we have our boundaries. We don't
mm,
step outside our boundaries. Our boundaries are low carb keto. Our ultimate is carnivore, and we work within those boundaries every day. So we just know where we stand. We know what we're doing. And for her, and actually for lots of people, I question why has festivals and birthday parties and things become so much focused on food. It used to
yeah.
be focused on fun, family gatherings, being with people, playing with friends. Now
Mm,
it's all focused and centered around all the food. So people say to me all the time, oh, doesn't Ashley feel, like restricted and just horrible going to these things and you making her eat the way she does? And I said, but if she eats the way your kids are eating,
she'll probably die.
she'll probably die.
Yeah,
She'll have a hypo and then she has to sit
yeah,
on the side of the pool until that hypo is corrected. And
yeah,
then maybe she can get back in and swim. And then she's potentially going to have another hypo until that insulin is out of
yeah,
her body. So could you please explain to me how all of that there packaged together is fun?
yeah.
Whereas if I make a few treats for her, she has those. We use minimal insulin. We have minimal potential of having a hypo. She's out swimming and running late
Mm,
circles around your children.
yeah,
So laughing her head off and having fun. So it's very interesting how in society now we've centered all these food-like products to be what is considered fun and acceptable, and um,
mm.
we've taken
And
away from actual
yeah,
real fun.
yeah, and it's all based around sugar predominantly as
Correct.
well. The
Yep.
sugar, the more sugary, the better as well, which is crazy. I mean, just once I'd love to go to, one of my kids' friends, birthday parties and just see like some meat or something. like like a wheel of cheese. Like my wife and I for our
Yep.
wedding, we had just like a cake, like a circles of wheels of cheese as a cake.
Yep.
We
Yep.
had a cheesecake made out of
Yep.
cheese. Because we
Beautiful.
wanted to do something a little bit different. Rather
Yeah.
than just sugar, sugar, sugar. But
Oh,
it is what it
I
is.
love it.
What would you say? People that are out there thinking, but isn't like low carb, keto, carnivore? Isn't that bad for kids? Like they just need carbs.
Well, then explain to me why kids are born in ketosis. That's sort of my answer. Most of them don't actually know that, but we are born in ketosis. Children are actually so much easier to get into ketosis. We're meant to. We're meant to have this other state. We are exceptional species, us human beings. We have adapted to have two fuel systems that we can get into, both. We have both for a reason. They're a necessity. Both are a necessity. I'm sorry, carbohydrates and glucose and that. There are so many cells in the body. I mean, you can probably explain this far better than I, but we have certain brain cells, certain heart cells that need glucose. But we also have this exceptional pathway called neoglucogenesis that makes that glucose for us. So yeah, cool. If we can get a little bit of fruit and honey, real fruit and honey that's actually nature, not man-made. But anyway, we won't go to that part. But we would have
Oh, we
eaten
can. We
those
got time.
things. Oh, good. I get very excited over this. I always tell people because another little story. I had one lady fight me one day. She was like, "I'm going to eat like the Bible tells me," and I said, "Oh, well, that's fine. You can eat any which way." I said, "But did you know most of the foods in the Bible don't exist today?"
Yes.
Sorry. We don't mean to rain on your parade, but most of our foods that we eat have been genetically modified, have been changed to look better, to look appealing, I said, just go and simply Google a banana. Go and
Yeah.
find out where a banana has come from.
Yeah.
And she just
All right.
looked at me
Yeah.
with this puzzle face.
Yeah. I think carrots, someone told me, I didn't actually know this. Someone told me that carrots actually are originally purple.
Yeah.
I
And
actually
woody
didn't know
like.
that.
Yep. So there were Maria Emmerich did a really good little post, and it had like watermelon, banana, carrots, and eggplant, and it had
Yeah.
all the different ones and what they looked like.
Yeah.
Super
Well,
interesting.
even ones that aren't that different necessarily in, color, whatever, like they've just been bred to be sweeter, to be bigger, to be more sugary, often then more toxic alongside that, unfortunately. But that's been ignored for so long. Some things out there like broccoli, cauliflower, these are essentially just man-made, artificial,
Correct.
kind of
The amount of
plants that never
pain
actually
people are in.
existed.
Yeah, the amount of pain people are in forcing themselves to eat broccoli and cauliflower because it's low carb and I've got to have my fiber. And I sit there and I'm like, because I've got to have a plant on my plate. I'm like, really? Do you? Like, I now try to teach people, I'm like, I want 3/4 of your plate to be meat based, whether it be a bit of cheese, cream, sour cream, meat. I want you to go 3/4 of your plate. If you have room for those plants, eat them because they're not as necessary for many of us as we think they are.
Yep.
They're not.
I think you're right. I mean, just to go back a little bit to the kind of the kids in ketosis, I think that is absolutely right. I mean, that's pretty much like a mic drop answer. Is well, kids are born in ketosis essentially. Babies, they breastfeed, they break out of ketosis for maybe an hour or so, and then they're back in ketosis again. Ketosis really is the natural state, and it was only because they started studying fed and fasted state essentially after we started stuffing our face full of carbohydrates that we even have this discussion around fed state versus fasted state. And ketosis really is predominantly the natural state. There is evidence to support that maybe it's not good to be in ketosis 24/7, 365, for the whole life, but predominantly, yes, we probably should be in ketosis.
Yeah.
But just again, to bring it back to kids and plants, people ask me, but on plants needed for kids? And I say, okay, but why do kids violently refuse them then?
Because they don't want them.
They
don't need them.
And then they always say,
know.
and when I've spoken about this a number of times, people that aren't new to the show, they'll have heard this a number of times, and these people say, yeah, but their kids are just naughty. I'm like, really? Your 6-month-old is naughty? 6 months? Like, they don't know naughty. They don't know good or bad. They don't even know left or right. They can't even see like a meter in front of their face virtually. Like, they don't know what's going on.
They know survival.
But they know instinct. That's it. They haven't been indoctrinated. They are very instinctive, very, intuitive. A piece of broccoli, piece of cabbage, they don't even know what to make of broccoli or cauliflower because it's not even in their, like, I don't know, whatever you call it, DNA knowledge, I don't know, DNA memory. They don't even recognize what it even is because it's essentially artificial. You give them a piece of meat and they just go to town on that. And you give them like peas or something and they just violently refuse it. Violently, like throwing it across the room and screaming bloody murder. They're just naughty. They don't know what's good for them. No. I asked someone the other day, why do kids not want vegetables then? And they said, this parent said, well, because they don't know what's good for them. I mean, the answer doesn't even make any sense. No. If it's good for them, why wouldn't they want to eat it? It just makes no sense.
It's crazy the way we sort of have been led to think and we've been led to believe and how our thoughts have changed. I mean, I talk to my dad a lot and he remembers sitting at his dining room table with his his grandparents and they used to say, come on, Neil, finish your meat. Then by the time it came to our dining room table, it was, come on, Trace, finish your veggies, eat your veggies, don't worry about anything else, eat your veggies, then you can have dessert. Somewhere in between there, we've kind of really lost our way.
Just completely flipped, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I mean, you're right. We're not supposed to live in a complete glucose state all the time, and we're not supposed to live in a complete ketosis state all the time. We're supposed to be metabolically flexible. predominantly, our brain loves ketones, and it will stay there if we need, but the body will ebb and flow between what it needs as we need it. If if a lion's chasing you, you're going to want to jump into that glucose system and run your little heart out. But then when you're resting and recovering, you want to be able to go back into those states. I mean, that's your anaerobic and just flew out my head.
Aerobic.
Aerobic
Yes.
states. It's all those states. Sorry, I should have had some more meat fat today. It just flew out my head. But you want to be able to go through those two states, and it's really important that we have both. I mean, I saw somewhere on Facebook yesterday someone talking about it's actually an experiment, this high carbohydrate diet we're on, and it started 50, 60 years ago. We're still in an experiment and we're failing miserably, but nobody wants to stop.
No, it's probably not wrong, really.
It was brought about, to start eating all these high carbohydrates and push this and high fructose and things like that. And it's kind of scary. I mean, walking around looking at school lunch boxes and things like that, just because I'm been trained to count carbs now, because having Ashley, when we first started, we don't really count carbs anymore because we just don't have them in anything that we eat. We don't worry about them, to be honest. But when I look at a shopping trolley, I mean, oh my goodness, I went to Costco tonight to get some of our staples, and I saw this family with 2 shopping trolleys from Costco walking together, and they probably spent the same amount of money as I did, except I had half a trolley and they had 2 full trolleys. My heart just, I wish I could go and talk to them. I wish I could say, hey, please, for your children's sake, like 99% of what's in your trolley is not real food.
Yeah.
But I can't. I have to be really careful what I do, what I say.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, isn't it, when you got to kind of bite your tongue, because you know that they could be making better choices. I mean, obviously, we're not body shaming people, and there's no judgment, of course, but it's hard when you know that actually with a bit of education they could probably make a change, small change that would maybe go a long way.
Yeah,
it is hard.
I wish, but I mean, look, everyone judges my trolley. I walk around with 4 massive, like I think I walked out of Costco today with 180 eggs.
Yeah. I'm surprised they let you buy that many.
So, well, I've made friends with people at Costco, as you can tell.
Yeah.
I talk to everyone, so I have my friends at Costco.
Yeah, our local Costco, you can only buy, I think, 2 lots of eggs, or like one big tray. But we walk out with like 10 packs of like the big mints of in Costco, and the people are just like, yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's the same. I mean, I'm feeding 6 people here, and I've got 2 teenage boys. So, pork rashers, mince. I don't stop my kids from eating anything meat. And I talk to people a lot about this too, as you're processing, because I'll say to people, get some salami, have some cabanossi, have some cabana, but good, go get good stuff of that stuff. They go, but I thought processed food was bad for you.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, you're just telling me that you had a bowl of oats for breakfast this morning. Hold a moment.
Context is king.
Could you please? I said, processing is a spectrum here. I said, we don't go out and bite a cow on the bum in the paddock. We actually have to process it to get it to a steak. Then I said, look at your cabanas and your salamis. I said, how close are they to that steak or that pork, depending where it comes from? And she goes, well, they're not that far away. Oh, I said, so, but then you're looking at all the other things like your oats and also all the other things that she mentioned, your yogurt and with fruit. And I said, that's all way down in this processing. So again, I said, it's been dubbed processed meat because it is different to a steak, but where is it on that processing line? And again, I always talk to people about their boundaries. How far are you going to go? For some people, okay, they can't have cabanas and hams and things like that because they've got histamine problems. They've got allergy things going on. So they've got to be really strict. My kids, other than, Ashley's actually very healthy. All 4 of my kids are very, very healthy. They're at a good place. We don't have any metabolic inflammation problems anymore. So a snack for my kids is salami with Parmesan cheese in the air fryer. because they can
Yeah.
have these things.
Sounds delicious.
Depends what you're healing, where you're going.
Yeah.
This is, I do see on a lot of Facebook groups all these fights with people, and I always, not always, but sometimes I will chime in and go, well, what are you trying to heal? What are you trying to do? If there's metabolic healing happening, then we've got to do this. If there's inflammation healing, then we've got to do this. There's all these different things that we've got to do. But especially our babies and our children, they've got a little bit more flexibility. Mine have. They've lived, a pretty clean sort of lifestyle since 2016, since Ashley was diagnosed. And so, we can have some of these salamis and cabanas, and I actually buy them from the butcher. He makes fantastic ones. We have sausages for breakfast. We have eggs. I like to make sure my kids have a lovely wide variety, but everything must have meat. There must be meat involved, or an animal product. So cheese, meat, I think it's extremely important. And vegetables or fruit, if any, are so secondary. But I still like them to experiment and see how they feel. My 16-year-old son goes, I don't need them. They're a waste of my chewing.
My chewing quota for the day.
My chewing quota. I mean, he's got to have 7 dinners, so I'm not wasting chewing power. I've got to lift weights tomorrow morning. I'm not wasting chewing power on that. So, great.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That's fine.
Where do you stand on like organs? Because you mentioned fruit and honey. We can come back to that if you want. But where do you stand on organs? Because I feed my kids organs. Now I've started experimenting with organs a little bit, and they don't want to just eat, certainly not raw organs. They don't want to eat that. They don't like the idea of just eating like, oh, here, I'll fry you up some liver. But if I chop it up and put it into mince, they know it's in there. I'm not hiding it. They know there's chicken heart. They know there's liver in there, maybe some other organs, and they eat it quite happily. What about your kids? Do you feed your kids organs?
I haven't done a lot of organs. They're not real interested. I mean, I have done some liver sausages a little bit. They weren't overly fussed. I have freeze-dried liver supplement here, and I will give it to the kids if they're sick, but my kids don't get sick. If they do, it's like, okay, I'm over that. And they're fine. So I'm pretty blessed. I haven't really delved into, and Paul, this is one thing that I spoke with Paul. He said, I got people on Carnivore who do organs, and I got people on Carnivore who don't. So I guess there's probably a bit of a, like, again, if it's a cultural thing, then eat it. If it's not really in my sort of world, so I haven't really explored with it or done anything with it. I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I'm just, if you want to eat it, go to town. I mean, I have a friend who ended up with a vitamin A toxicity because she ate too much liver.
Really? Because we hear people, this is from a doctor's perspective. I do say people just be careful of organs because you can get this vitamin A toxicity. And then you always see people on these Facebook groups, oh, I eat like 4 kilos of liver a day and I don't get vitamin A, and you're just making it up. And you're like, oh, really? Okay. Yeah. But so you've obviously seen it, kind of, well, secondhand, I suppose, but you've seen it in someone who actually had a vitamin A toxicity from too much liver. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I wonder if it's, like the oxalate sort of things, everyone has a different threshold, a different requirement, a different need. I mean, we all do. We're individuals. I mean, we're all humans. We breathe air and stuff, but at the end of the day, cellularly, everything, we're completely different. Maybe some of us do, maybe some of us don't. Why, I can't answer that. I don't know, but no, in the 4.5 years that I've been meat-based, I think I've eaten 1 liver beef sausage, and that was it. Wasn't really, not my thing. Sorry.
No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I think I would agree with you. I think some people, they want to do it. That's great. If they don't want to do it, that's also fine. I've said from the start, and I'll probably say it till the day I die, I don't think we necessarily need carnivore. I need organs on carnivore. But for some people, maybe they have a role. I mean, I'm actually
Maybe.
experimenting with them myself now, as I said, and you probably can't see it from the video. I don't know if I move this, people might be able to see my hair is actually regrowing now,
Oh,
like
wow.
a week on liver, and
Mm,
it's like the photos are insane. I'm going to be putting them up on my Instagram.
yep.
People are listening in the car are just like, I can't see the photos. um on YouTube you might be able
It's
to
there. I
see,
can see
but
it, people. I can see
my head is still shining from the light. My hope is to get enough hair that I don't have to. I did an advert for my medical center, and they had to like put makeup on my head to stop it being so shiny because I'm bald. That was a bit embarrassing,
Oh, oh,
but this interesting, like a week on liver, and like my hair, like the photos are just unbelievable. Like the
mm,
difference is
mm,
is crazy.
yeah.
So but I think they might have a role for some
Mm,
people, but
mm,
also I don't think they're essential. Where do you stand
yeah.
on like things like raw honey? You mentioned Paul Saladino a number of times that he's all
Mm,
about the raw
mm,
honey and the raw milk. Where do you stand on those things? Do you have those in your house? Do you
yeah.
not?
Yeah. Well, I have a type 1 diabetic, so I have to correct her. As well as we do with food and as well as everything is, we still do have mistakes and things happen, and I still need to correct her. So I try to correct as natural as I can. I try to correct with food. Every situation, as you would know, being a doctor with a type 1 diabetic is different. If she's about to drive somewhere and she is tracking a bit low, then yes, I will correct straight away with glucose because the time calls for glucose. We need to have that right now. If she's at home and, she's dinking around, whatever, and it's like, oh, Ash, she's a bit low, or she goes, Mum, I'm feeling a little bit low. We sort of work out how much insulin she's got. We've got a great app, and I'll just say, oh, there's a little bit on board. Let's have some milk, or we might have some honey. Honey's a great, it's not too spiky because it's not completely glucose. It's a kind of a mix. But honey can be interesting to play with because it's an organic substance. It's not exactly always exactly the same to correct with, but there's a lot of nutrients in honey. I grew up using manuka honey for different things. I don't My children don't walk up and eat honey just purely because they have sweet cravings. My children don't really have those, which I'm grateful about. But honey is there, and sometimes they'll have a bit of honey, but it's usually more for correcting Ashley. So we have raw honey or local honey. I make sure we have some of that. Again, it's not for everybody. If you've got metabolic problems, I'm sorry, but honey's not going to help you.
Probably not.
Uh,
No.
it's going to be challenging for you. Um, if you've got brain problems like I have, and the things that I've been working on, I don't want to have honey. I don't want to have spikes in my brain. I want my brain to be on fire. I want it to be working. I don't need it. However, on the flip side, it was a very interesting podcast that Sally did with somebody. Can't remember. I've watched so many of her podcasts. Where she spoke about Paul Saladino having possible metabolic problems. So he does need to include honey and fruit in his diet. He's also extremely active. He does a lot of surfing. So, and he lives in a place where he gets a lot of sunlight. He gets a lot of things. It's different. Here in Canberra, for example, I mean, it was another horror. I mean, I'm from Queensland, so 18 degrees is horrible here. For everybody else, Canberrans are like cheering because it's getting close to 20. I'm still here going, this is sad. Um, my husband laughs all the time because I'm always cold. But it's interesting because we're living in a different place. You've got to take all these things into consideration. Now, Ashley will have a mango in summer because it's seasonal. She's moving around and running around. We would never have a mango before dinner or like before bed. But if she
Mm.
has a mango in the middle of the day, she can move around. She can go for a walk. She's probably running. We're going swimming. We've got all these things happening with us. There's no way I'd let her have a mango in the middle of winter where it's
Mm.
cold and she's sitting down and doing nothing. Mango's also quite low oxalate. So if she's feeling like that, she can. As I said, we've got family up in Queensland. So a mango is a summertime fruit.
Mhm.
I don't have so many problems with some fruits. I personally do not like them. Um, I am extremely sensitive to fructose. It's a neurotoxin. I am very, very. It doesn't sit with me. And again, that is something I have fought my parents since I was little. I was the science experiment kid. I would leave fruit in the bottom of my school bag for as long as I possibly could because I've always hated fruit. I hate how it makes me feel. And I think people should listen to that and not force themselves to eat fruit if they don't want to. If some people would like to eat a little bit of fruit and their liver is working well, they have a fairly active lifestyle and it's seasonal, then go do it. It's your diet. It's your lifestyle. I really, as much as I'm very much a health coach that encourages people to eat meat, I also hate labels. Why do you have to, be carnivore, keto, low carb? Why can't you ebb and flow between the three of them throughout your day? Why can't you just be Tracey who just eats this today? Sometimes these names can become too dogmatic and people have to fit themselves in a category, and
I agree.
what's right for somebody is going to be wrong for somebody else. And so this is why we need to work out what our own individual style is. I talk to a lot of people about their culture, where they come from, going back and eating foods that their ancestors ate. My husband is half Singaporean Chinese and German English, and a lot of Western foods don't work in his body. He is the size of a German. He's 6'5", 120 kilos. Like, he's a massive person. Metabolically, though, he is such a freshie because he's first generation Western diet. His mother didn't move to Western foods until she was about 20, somewhere between 20 and 30, when she went to university to study to be a nurse. Before that, she lived on her organic chicken farm. And it's not organic like these days where we choose if we want to be organic. This was an organic farm out in the middle of Singapore, where she has a dialect. She doesn't even speak Chinese. She speaks a dialect because she's out in the middle of whoop whoop. And she grew up with this pristine diet. Sorry, I'm very Aussie. Whoop whoop.
Yeah. Anyway, just anyone that's listening that's like, what the hell is she on about? Whoop whoop. It's a bit of an Australianism. So whoop whoop is a small town in New South Wales. It's kind of is it New South Wales or Canberra? It's on the border, isn't it? I think. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere.
In Africa.
Is it? Oh, I thought it was. Maybe I'm wrong.
Whoop whoop
anyway.
is a place you don't know where it is, but it's pretty far away.
It's a pretty small place that nobody really knows where it is. There we go.
Exactly.
Let's call it. I'm gonna just Google that while I'm talking about it.
And just correct. As I said, I grew up in Queensland. I have my little.
So it's an Australian term meaning a place that's far distant from anything. So there you go. It's maybe not even actually a real place. Apparently, it has
how to speak Aussie.
Yes, apparently it has some other slightly weird meanings. So maybe don't Google it. But if we other weird meanings. Okay, I mean, I'm conscious of time, Tracey, because we've been speaking for about an hour and a half now. I could talk all day on this, but our listeners might be kind of getting to the end of their long car journeys now and thinking, okay, it's about time to turn off. I think you're right that labels can sometimes be harmful, and maybe we don't have to be fixed in these ideas, carnivore, animal based, whatever we kind of really want to call it. I know you were keen to talk about your Facebook group, so I'm conscious of time, so I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
I'll wrap it up very quickly. So I run Low Carb Canberra here in obviously Canberra, and we have a fantastic event happening on the 23rd and 24th of September. We have guest speakers like Jalal Khan, who is a functional dentist in Sydney, also a quantum biologist. We have Pran Yoga Nathan coming. We have biochemist Richard Morris, who was a former 2 Keto dude. We have Dr. Jessica Turton, who is a dietitian, runs Elit's Health. My co-founder of Low Carb Canberra, Dr. Liz Fraser. So we'll have talks. She's doing talks on seed oils and meat causes type 2 diabetes, ? So she brings lots of good ones. The functional medicine doctor that I work alongside, Anya Michelle, is talking, I'm not actually sure of what her title is. She's German. I love her, but she said too many people talk about women's bits and pieces and PCOS. She goes, I'm going to talk about balls. And I went, oh, all
Fair
right.
enough.
So her talk's going to be the opposite of PCOS and what's actually happening in our young men,
Yes,
which
I
I think
think,
is very prevalent
yeah.
and very good, because it's PCOS is not just something, or type 4 diabetes is not just something that's happening in women, it's also happening in our young men.
Yeah.
So she brings a lot of very interesting topics to the table. I love Anya. That's why I work alongside her. We have a few other doctors that are coming and talking about their own metabolic journey and changing their health. I have a trauma psychologist coming to speak. He's very fantastic at talking about why we reach for the things we do and the psychology around food. So we've got quite a lineup of people.
Yeah. And when is that, sorry?
23rd, 24th of September. So
Right.
this
Okay.
month.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this episode is going to be out before then, but what I will do, I will have to look at the schedule because I've got a few episodes backed up, so I might bump it up a bit anyway. I can be putting some stuff on my socials anyway to kind of display that. So make sure you send me all those links, and
cool.
Send me all those links, and I'll put some stuff on my socials anyway for people, so they can get that. So I'm just not sure if it'll be out by then. Great. Is there anything? I mean, we've spoken about a lot. Otherwise, Tracey, is there anything else that you think is important for people to know? Any other amazing pearls of wisdom that you've got that you want to impart for people today?
The biggest thing I always tell people is the smallest step is still a step in the right direction. Don't get too caught up. If you are going to go animal-based, carnivore, whatever you'd like to call it, make sure you're comfortable with whatever you call it. Trial all foods, seafood, all meats, everything, and then you eliminate what you need to. You eat what you need to that makes you feel good and make you feel healthy. Don't worry about what somebody else is doing. It's not your game. Your game is what's in front of you, and just stay true to yourself. That's all you really can do. And if you're a mum of a sick child, keep standing up and fighting for your truth, there are people out there that can help you. There are people that will listen. You just have to find your tribe. And that's what I've done. So if you get stuck, find me on Facebook or anywhere and I'll help you find someone. There's lots of people that I know and there's lots of people that I haven't met yet, but I'll know you soon.
Yeah. I mean, how can people find you on social media then, Tracey?
So just Tracey Kimberley. I'm Tracey Kimberley (Wells). That was my maiden name. A lot of people know me as Tracey Wells as well. On Facebook, anybody can join Low Carb Canberra. I don't mind. Lots of people message me from all different walks of life because they've listened to me from Low Carb Down Under or they've watched something on Low Carb Canberra, and I will endeavour to message and talk to anybody and everybody that message me for whatever reason. I don't mind, even if it's just to connect or to find somebody. I had a lady a couple of years ago call me from Tasmania because she found my number somewhere and called me because her daughter had just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and 4 months later her second daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. We spent 3 hours on the phone. I will give time to any type 1 diabetic. I don't care where you're from. But please, if you ever need anything or you just want somebody to listen, just message me. Find me on Messenger. I'm pretty useless with electronics and social media, so if you send me a friend request or you send me a message request and it takes me a couple of days to get back to it, sorry, but I will find you.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Well, that's very kind of you to obviously put that offer out there, Tracey. So, and it sounds like you've got a great deal of wisdom, a great deal of experience also to back that up. You mentioned a number of times you don't feel like you know everything, but I think you probably know far more than you're giving yourself credit for. And I think sounds like you've been an absolutely fantastic mum and a great advocate for your daughter and your other kids.
Thank you.
So good on you.
You've said that when you're a parent, sometimes you got to stand up and be their voice because they don't have one yet.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do. Well, thank you so much for coming on today's show, Tracey. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Just like always with all my guests, I have learned some stuff today. So I love doing these podcasts because I love learning from people and just connecting with like-minded individuals. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you everybody for watching and tuning into this episode of the Meat Medic podcast. We'll see you guys in the next episode.